News. Transfer news. Match previews. Legend interviews. Spurs women. Press conferences. Covering everything Tottenham and England.
Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of the Spurs Chat Podcast. In this edition, we will be reflecting on the 2023-2024 campaign. Of course, Ange Postecoglou's first season in charge at the club. We will also be looking ahead to the summer transfer window and looking ahead to the 2024-2025 season. Now, joining me is very special guest. I love having him on the show, Martin Lipton, Chief Sports Reporter at The Sun. Martin, it's been a long while. How are you?
I'm very well, Chris, and I'm glad the season's over. But it's a lot better than it was this time last year. So let's look on the positive. Things are going in the right direction as opposed to going in the wrong direction. Has to be improved, but yeah, generally, it's a better direction of travel.
I love it, Martin. I ask guests how they are, and they cannot wait to talk about Spurs. Now, you've said that we're going in the right direction. What have you made of Ange Postecoglou's first season in charge? Of course, Spurs have finished fifth in the Premier League table. We will be playing Europa League football next year.
I think if you've been offered this on, was it August the 9th, 10th, when you hear that Harry Kane is going to Bayern Munich and the season's about to start and you're probably offered fifth, you definitely take it. Simple as that. It's given what had happened before, given we didn't really know what the quality of players were. You can't really tell from pre-season. You then lose arguably the greatest player in the history of the club, a guaranteed source of 25 plus goals per season, and a guaranteed creativity of 12 to 15 goals per season. Never knowing if you're going to replace. With all of that, with an uncertainty, with a mood that was pretty negative going in as well on the back of the previous couple of years, I think you've got to be pretty happy with it. The problem is that expectations were overraised by the start, and there was a pretty miserable spell through April into May. But in the end, fifth is where they probably deserve to be. In most years, that would have been enough for Champions League football. But it wasn't this year. Well, that's so be it. And I think actually Europa League in many ways is better than Champions League. Saying that, I think they'd have got to the last 16 of the Champions League anyhow next season. And then we'll see what could happen after that. But I think as it stands, it's good. And I'm fairly comfortable with the way things panned out.
Martin, what did you make of the appointment of Ange Postecoglou and what have you made of his first year? What do you like him?
I think it would be very much for the better if he could learn to look into a camera. I still don't understand. And it's just obviously he's a shy man. It's not a criticism. It's like you don't have to look down. You're allowed to look up. He says bloke is probably not looking up at the moment. But, you learn when you're in front of a camera that you're supposed to look at the camera and not look away from it. Other than that, I don't think there are quibbles. Always will be, because no manager is without those. But he's brought back a sense of unity. He's brought back a pattern of play that's actually fun to watch. He's brought back a cast of mind that's been sorely absent for far too long. Most of the signings have worked. The odd one hasn't, but that's just the nature of football. There's a cohesiveness about the team. And I also think more important, more intrinsic, more vital is that the fans actually want to go now. It isn't a feat of endurance anymore. It's a feat of enjoyment. Well, that in itself is exactly what it's about. It is actually football. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be an escape from reality. It's not supposed to be a reflection of the difficult parts of our lives, albeit that supporting Spurs tends to be a reflection of the difficult parts of our lives, as we know. But it isn't supposed to be like that. And it's been fun. And most of this year has been good. And even when they lose, in the main, they've lost because they're trying to win, not they've lost because they were trying not to lose, which was the case before. And I think that is the most important thing. Look, there are obvious things that you might look at and think, can he be a little bit less rigid at times? Can he sort out defending set pieces? I mean, they do talk about things going through the club, and then you watch the women's team in the FA Cup final. It was like watching the men. Every set piece was a goal, potentially, because they couldn't defend them. But that's a minor thing that can be sorted. But there's far more positive than negative, and I think that anyone who can't see that is being willfully blind.
Well, I was going to say that, Martin. I completely agree with you. I think that this season will go down as a success. I think next year will be very interesting. Certainly, what we'll talk about shortly about the transfer windows. But do you think that? What do you think of the criticism aimed at Ange Postecoglou? Because there has been a lot this season.
Some of it's been fair. I do think he was too resistant to moving, for example, Van de Ven to cover when Udogie got injured. I think his adherence to a way of playing is a good thing. But if you haven't got the quality of personnel to play that way, and at periods in this season we didn't, maybe you've got to be slightly more pragmatic to try and get results. If we played in a slightly different way, we beat West Ham. If we beat West Ham, rather than lose to West Ham, we come fourth in the round. That doesn't mean we would have won other games, etc. But you can look at that. So it would be wrong to say that he's above criticism, because he's not, because he's also learning his own way of playing in the Premier League, playing against a higher quality of manager and player than he's ever done before, where he hasn't got more resources than anybody else as he did at Celtic, or good resources equal to anybody that he did in Australia and Japan, and where coaches only need a couple of games to work out where you might be vulnerable, and then how do you adapt to that? And that's a dog barking in the background. I can't do anything about that. So he has to learn to fix things before the before the opposition see them, as it were. Try and change it. And you need to constantly evolve to be a success in the Premier League. You can't just do one thing and hope it will work. You have to have ability to change it and to tweak it, and then to go back to it if you need to. But you can't just have one way of playing. I think that's the most important lesson that will be learned. That doesn't mean you can't stylistically play in a certain way. That doesn't mean become negative and try and just play, reactive, no possession football. That's not what I'm talking about. It's about just a couple of minor tweaks. And the fact that he did make those in the last couple of weeks, against Man City, we play without a striker. Now, we haven't done that all season. I'm not saying that you would do that very often.
Yeah.
But the idea that he can't evolve, well, in that circumstance, he absolutely did. And in fact, there were, we know the issues that surrounded that game, but they could easily got a result in that match. I mean, let's be honest, Son should score. And most of the game, Spurs were probably the better team. It was arguably the best performance they had in the last 6 months of the season. The really worrying thing for me and disappointing thing is that it wasn't between New Year's Eve and the final day of the season. The only match that Spurs led at half-time and won was Sheffield United on the final day of the season. Now, obviously, the results weren't that terrible because we ended up fifth. But you don't want to be having to win every game in the last 15 minutes. You don't want to be coming behind. How many clean sheets did Spurs keep at home in the second half of the season? At home, not enough. In total, not enough. You can't always anticipate that you're going to come back. You need to keep 16, 17 clean sheets if you want to be realistic contenders to win the title.
They don't seem to worry about clean sheets, though, Martin. Even Vicario said the other day that we don't worry about clean sheets.
Well, yeah, he might say that, but if he kept 17, he'd be starting to, we kept all those clean sheets. I mean, it's like making a virtue of necessity, that, isn't it? We all do that. I don't care about being 5'6". I'd love to be 6 foot, but it doesn't matter. You just say what you are. You try and accentuate that positive. I just think the reality is, if you don't concede goals, you've got more chance of winning matches. You don't want to be conceding more than 40 goals in a league season, realistically, a goal a game, because a few games you're going to get spat. You're going to concede 2 or 3. It's the nature of it. Even the best teams do. But you want to be having 15, 16, 17 when you don't concede at all. Because you're not going, and that sounds silly, but you're not going to lose those games, are you? You can only win or draw. So if you get 15 clean sheets, you're pretty much nailed on for 40 points, maybe 45 points, and that gives you a really good chance of winning the title.
Martin, what do you make of the defending of Spurs this season? Because when you think that you've got Mickey van der Ven and Christian Romero at the back, two quality defenders, two really quality defenders in the Premier League. Do you think that, and what do you make of zonal marking?
Look, I don't mind how you mark set pieces. It's that you actually mark, and we didn't do that. We weren't picking up the runners. We weren't picking up the spaces. If you're talking about defending in the round, he's making a stylistic approach. He's going to play really narrow because he thinks with the inverted fullbacks, you are then exposed out wide. Prime example of that were 2 games over the Christmas New Year period. I went to one which was Bournemouth, which we managed to win 3-1, and they were the better team. And then Manchester United, the first game after the break, where once again we conceded goals, the same goal, both down the Porro channel, because he was inside and they were getting exposed out wide. Now that's because Rashford's quick. Let's be honest, he's a good player. Or hasn't been a great player, but he has got the ability to hurt you. Bournemouth murdered us out wide, and we got away with it. Solanke could have scored 5 that game, and we could have scored a few as well. But it was a lucky win in many ways, and it was a sort of precursor for the rest of the season that there were too many matches where we weren't authoritative, and that's because the defensive screen wasn't good enough. And I'm not talking about individuals, but the screen, the 6 or the 4, whatever you want to call him, the player at the base of that midfield and the person alongside him have got to provide a better screen than we did this season, particularly when you're playing narrow. You can't afford to let people get at you. And it was too easy in transition. We would lose the ball on the edge of the box and suddenly we're in trouble. We were conceding goals from the wrong place. There are times when if you lose the ball on your halfway line, that happens as a danger. But you shouldn't be conceding counter-attacking goals from 25 yards from their goal, not if you're organised. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed. But then again, this is being nitpicking and looking at the negatives. I thought that Udogie was outstanding when he came in all through the season, a little bit rash occasionally.
Yeah. Van
der Ven, excellent. He had 1 poor match out of 30, not 30 odd, because he missed obviously 3 months with that injury he got against Chelsea. Romero had his mad moment, 2 of them actually. One he got away with against Newcastle, the one he had against Chelsea. I still think that the turning point of the season was Chelsea at home. Not just the injuries, because you didn't just lose 2, you lost Maddison as well. It was, we're 1-0 up, and for no obvious reason, Romero goes on a mad charge 60 yards forward for no reason at all. Doesn't need to do that. Loses the ball, gets out of control, makes a bad tackle, and he never got his equilibrium back in the next 5 minutes. And you can say, well, that tackle that he got sent off for, others have got away with. Well, maybe they did get away with it. It's still a red card. Let's stop moaning about decisions, because everyone gets them. Everton's goal against us that was disallowed should have stood. Sometimes you get lucky with decisions, sometimes you don't. Don't moan about it, because they all go both ways. But I thought that was a turning point for many reasons. But I'm still quite confident where we are. I think Porro got better as the season went on, particularly as an attacking source, which was great. And what we lacked all season, for half the season, was a proper 9 at the other end. Because if you look at Richarlison's goal return, when he was on the pitch, he was actually really good. But he missed half the season. And Son is far more effective playing wide and coming in than he is through the middle. So obvious to me that that's something that has to be addressed. But as I said, I don't want to get too down, because hold on, 66 points, 5th place, European football again. Yeah, that's all right. And also, as I said, more important, the connection between the team and the fans in the main much improved. The connection between the fans and the club maybe differently. That's another issue we might want to touch on later. But as I said, far more positive than negative as far as I'm concerned.
Martin, earlier you mentioned Heung-min Son's chance against City. I don't know whether you were at that game. I was, and it was such a weird atmosphere. I've never known or seen anything like it. And a lot of the fans wanted City to win that game. What did you make of that? And what did the Sun newsroom make of that?
Well, I wasn't either in the stadium or in the Sun newsroom. I think it was a good story. When the manager's questioning the fans and their mentality and the club's mentality, you are going to put it on the back page of your newspaper. It's too good a story. You can't pretend otherwise. And if that had been any other manager of any other club, it would have been exactly the same. If that had been, Ten Hag talking about denying City, or someone at Everton, Dyche talking about denying Liverpool, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same story. It doesn't really, it doesn't change at all. It's a good tale. I thought the atmosphere was, even from TV, was clearly odd and restrained and unlikely and unusual. It was one of those games where I wanted Spurs to win, because I always want Spurs to win. But when they lost, I did think, oh, well, for the greater good. I think that's the reality, is that whatever the result was, you were going to have mixed emotions. The ideal would have been Spurs win and then Everton turned over Arsenal on the last game of the season. But as it happened, for the greater good, I think Villa would have beaten Palace if they needed to in that final game, come what may. And Spurs had to beat City, and I don't think they were ever going to do that. I think the reality, the most likely result was going to, from a Spurs perspective, if they didn't lose, was going to be a draw. And they could have got that draw. And indeed, obviously, if they scored the first goal, it's very different, because City then might have panicked. But they did score the first goal. And then in the end, that was the right result. I think it's taught everyone a bit more about the manager, actually, and for the better, in that he doesn't buy into emotion in that regard. He believes he's got a job to do. And we need to remember that next season, that he's doing this because he genuinely thinks it's about trying to win. And he doesn't care anything else. Now, what you might say to him is, okay, then, if that's what you think, play the first team in the League Cup.
Yeah.
And in the FA Cup, and try and win a trophy that way. And try and do that in Europe as well. I mean, if you win the first 5 in the Europa League, you've got 3 to go, you can maybe play some other players. Or if you're 3-0 up against Mickey Mouse from Vilnius or wherever, not to disparage any Lithuanians who are listening, you can send on some kids and give them a bit of game time. But you don't gamble with them until they're ready. Look, I would love to see some of these boys get some game time, but you don't want to throw them in too early. Oh, let's play Mikey Moore. He's 16.
Yeah.
He looks a good football player, a really good football player, but he's 16. And unless you're built like Wayne Rooney was at 16, unless you've got the absolute electric pace at 17 that Ronaldo and Giggs and Owen had, you don't want to be playing too much against full-grown, adult, hard-as-nails professional footballers whose livelihoods are on the line, because they'll try and snap you in half. They just will, because that's their job. So let's be sensible about bringing these players and looking at them. But I think that the manager learned things about the club he didn't know. I think the thing that, by the sound of it, the thing that upset him most were the people within the club who were saying, oh, don't worry about this one, throw this one, because that's just not his mentality. And it may be that in a few months' time, we see that certain people, and I don't know any names, I'm not trying to point fingers, but we might find there may have been a bit of a change in backroom staff. Yeah,
I agree. Martin, what do you expect to happen in the summer transfer window? Because Spurs have got such a big rebuild. Postecoglou obviously knew this. A lot of players went out the door in the summer. A lot of players come in. You've rightly said, they were successful signings. But what do you think will happen this window? And are you impressed with the change? Because Postecoglou has called for change on a number of occasions this season, even recently, saying that major changes needed at the football club. What do you expect to happen?
I never expect anything to happen because I've been disappointed in the past. What I think should happen is a considerable overhaul, and I want to get rid of players whose time has come, who can be replaced, but replaced by not just players who have similar ability, but of equal, most of greater ability, and who can offer something. There are certain players at that club who've been there too long and have either never been able to do anything of any significance, or never shown their ability to do anything of any significance, or whose time is up, just because nothing lasts forever. And if you try and think it does last forever, you're an idiot, because you have to make changes. So there are players I would get rid of. Who comes in, I do not know, but there are positions that I would do. Now, I'd imagine anybody watching this, most of these names are going to be pretty blooming obvious. So, Sessegnon out. Gill, what the hell? What a waste of time. What a waste of money. What a waste of space. Get rid. And Ndombele, just write his contract off. There is no point. Whatever it costs, just get him out, because there is no point in keeping him. Lo Celso, is he ever going to make an impression? He's been there 5 years nearly, never made an impression, it's never been fit. If you can get anything for him, do so. Højbjerg, been a great player for what he is, but he'll never be more than what he is. And what he is isn't good enough to finish in the top 3 in the Premier League. Thanks very much. You've been a great servant. Time to go. Look at some of the others. Davis, been brilliant. 10 years, outstanding. Give him a free transfer. Give him a testimonial, because I think he deserves that. I know that they don't need money, but he's been a great servant to the club. But I think it's time. I really do. Emerson, he's not adept at playing as a right back in an inverted fullback system. It's not his fault. There have been times when he's played really well, times when he's played less well. Never doubted his commitment. But no, if you really want to make strides forward, you get rid. So that's what, 7? And I've not even started, I could probably find some more. There's an issue about Skip, I think. I certainly have got grave doubts about Bissouma. I want Bentancur to be fully fit. Likewise, Maddison, actually. I mean, both of them, we saw 3 months of Maddison and then nothing else for various reasons. We haven't seen Bentancur all season. We've seen a version of Bentancur. It's not the version that we had, apart from that one game against United when he drove with the ball. But he came back too early, then got injured again and came back even earlier because he just wants to play. And I don't blame him for that, but he's not been effective. But he's a really good player if you get him right. And then look at the others. Richarlison is a real question mark. Is Richarlison your first choice number 9? Given his injury record, no. Is he someone who would be really effective to make 20 starts in a 55-game season and come off the bench in another 30 games if you can keep him fit? Yes. Will he score goals? Certainly. Can he wind up the opposition and can he get the fans going? Absolutely. Is he a must keep? No, if you can get better. But if you can't get better, he's not a must sell. So there's just a few thoughts straight away. We're going to need a second goalkeeper because I'm assuming Foster goes, unless he's got absolutely zero ambition, which he probably has at this stage in his career. But who's your number 2 keeper? Because whoever comes in as number 2 isn't going to play as long as they can sort out Vicario and corners. But that means get some bodies around him to create space. And maybe he should start taking a few dives properly and get free kick like other goalkeepers do. Make a point of running into the opposition man who's in the way and get the free kick because the referee will give it if he sees that. Things like that, we need to be a bit more smart. So, but there's, that's a lot of bodies out. It means you've got to get bodies in.
That's a lot of work to do, isn't it?
Yeah. And can you do that all in one summer? Well, we'll find out. If you really want to back the manager, you can. Remembering financial realities. So basically for every £1 you make in the transfer market selling, you can spend 5 effectively. You've then got to take into account wages when it comes to UEFA regulations. But given even this year, Spurs are going to have 400+ million in turnover without Europe. Now, next season, minimum of 13 million, probably being realistic, 25 million from European money, in addition to whatever else they earn. And the extra revenue from those matches, even if they go slightly, that's £4 million a game minimum. They're going to play at least 4, you'd imagine at least 5 home games in Europe. It's another 20 million, which is helpful. It's not in a terrible position. Spurs can spend, you're allowed 80% of revenue on wages per annum. Spurs' revenue is going to be over 400 million. 80% of that is 320 million. It's a lot of money. We're not in any problem at all. So you can spend it. There has to be a will to spend it. There has to be a determination to make the expenditure, remembering that they're not all going to work. You know, one of the ones I didn't mention was the Solomon, who hasn't played a game. But I can understand reasons for getting rid. Now you've got Bergvall coming in. The Swedes tell me he's fantastic. He's still very, very young. We can't have too much expectation, but he could be a really important player. Let's find out. We'll know more in January, I suspect. What do they do with Valise and Scarlett and Parrott and Lancashire, who's done really, you'll know, Chris, you'd have seen him playing for the 21s Lancashire. Everything they talked about, he's more than delivered on. He's got loads of goals. He clearly wants to be the target man. His link-up play is quite good. I would say he needs to go on loan, preferably to another Premier League club. If not, a team that's going to be at the top of the Championship. So maybe, you know, do Leeds want him because they're going to be at the top of the Championship? Do Burnley want him because they're going to be? It's a team of that who's going to be playing at the top of the Championship. So he's used to being a team that has the ball because Spurs have the ball. He needs to be in a team that, well, doesn't quite replicate, but is a similar sort of way of playing. Because I don't think you want to throw him straight into the first team squad at this stage, unless you really think he's good enough. But I think, looking at the obvious example, who does he remind you of as a player? There's a certain amount of Kane about him. Kane needed 3-4 loans before he was ready. And doesn't mean that Lancashire will be ready on 3 or 4 loans, but he's not had them. You know, he had those spears. He was at Arsenal, then he went to Sheffield, but he's only ever played youth team football. It's too much to ask him to be playing first team football at the Premier League level because he's not a generational talent. He's not Harry Kane, and Harry Kane needed 4 loans out before he was ready. But what do you do with Valise? Because he didn't get a kick at Sevilla, but they obviously fancied him. We don't know. And he scored that goal against Brighton. And I thought actually he might have a chance. And it happens. If we'd known that Richarlison was going to get injured, he probably wouldn't have gone out on loan. You know, Scarlett did okay, but not great. Although he's done well for England representative. Parrott did well, but in Holland for a second-ish, lower Eredivisie team. Are any of them going to be first team starters? No. So there needs to be obviously a 9 brought in. But also, Martin, I think, go on.
I was going to say, when you talk about the financials, what do you expect the transfer budget for Postecoglou to be in the summer? And I know this might be an obvious question to a lot of people, but what positions would you really like to see Postecoglou strengthen in the summer?
Right. Well, the easier one is the second one, because the first one depends on how much you get in to a degree, plus how ambitious you need to be and what you think is the right move. For example, if you get rid of Richarlison, if the Saudis pay 60 million for Richarlison, then you can spend 240 million without even trying because of amortization over 5 years of the next contract for players you bring in. So that would determine a lot. What I would say is cover left back who can invert, cover right back who can invert. I've seen, I wouldn't be at all unhappy to see Walker Peters come back because he never wanted to leave in the first place. He felt he was being pushed out against his will. Still has a fondness for the club, and I think he's been excellent for Southampton. I know they're in the Premier League, and he might want to play for them, but he could actually cover both sides. I think he's more right side than left side, but Southampton played him at left quite a bit, haven't they? So he's a versatile player. He has it. People forget he's played for England. He's not that bad, He's got an England cap or two. But yeah, so obviously, if Sessegnon needs to be replaced, Davis also, I say, needs to be replaced. So that gives you a left back. I also want somebody who can an extra centre half. So then we've got 4 plus Phillips 5, because I think Phillips, he played for Plymouth last year. Do you send him out on loan, or actually think he's good enough? Given that you can't use Dorrington for 6 months, probably because he's had the injury, the operation, we don't know when he'll be back, and you've got to add on 2 months for fitness and all of that. Yeah. So you've got Romero, Van der Ven, Radisson, the 4th, whoever that might be, plus Phillips gives you 5. That's all right. If Hoberg goes as he should, you need another proper base of the midfield holder. I still think we need a really flying, another aggressive attacking winger. I know that Werner's coming back. I think Werner is a very good last 20. I think there'll be games against particularly teams that sit deep that he's quite, because he can run in behind and he is jet-heeled. He's useful. And I don't think he's a terrible player at all. I think in fact, before the injury, while he might have missed a few, he also created quite a lot. And should have been 2 assists that ended up being own goals that came from his runs and crosses. I don't think he was terrible. I don't think he's a starter, but I don't think he's a bad squad player. And it's a cheapie as well if it's just a loan with this £8 million option at the end of the season, which they won't take up. It's just a loan. I said a 9. I'd like to see a genuine. Well, the replacement for Lo Celso has got to be a better, as good as or not as bad as, not far short of what Maddison can be at his best. I'd like the other option I think you could think about is where does Kulusevski really want to play? It may be that he's better as a 10 or even a midfielder than doing the same thing over and over again, playing wide right. I also think that Johnson will get better and better as the season goes on. I think he did well last year. I think as long as he trains on, I think he can be really effective. I think he needs to finish better. That Burnley game at the end of the season was indicative of what he doesn't sometimes do. Not just the miss when he tried the right thing, which is to roll it in at the near post because the gap was so big, but it's the being a fraction away from getting the touch at the far post. He's got to anticipate a fraction of a second earlier. There've been 2 or 3 of those this season when he's been sliding in and not quite got the touch, and he's got to be more aware. But I think that will come because I think there's a talent there. And I see we've been linked with Eze, who I've always liked since he was at QPR. And if you could give me, I sound awful, we're going to nick from Palace, but if you would give me Gay, Eze and Elise, I wouldn't be too unhappy. I don't think you get all 3, but I think all 3 are outstanding players. And I quite like the boy Wharton as well, but I don't think we're going to get him as well. But I think we need to, I think the fans understandably want a marquee striker, a marquee player to come in. I know for a number of reasons that Tony would be interested in Tottenham. I know for a specific reason that he was actually eyeing it 2 years ago, that he thought there was a real chance of going in because there was a belief that Kane would go to United, which I tried to dissuade them from because I couldn't see that happening for a variety of reasons, not unrelated to Daniel Levy's relationship with Manchester United. But I think Tony gives you something different. He's an absolute pain. I know he didn't score too many goals at the end of the season, and I think because he came back too much to prove, and sort of he'd been out for too long. But I do think that he would really give them something and a focal point to the attack. It's all well and good getting the ball wide and crossing it, but you need a centre forward who's going to be in there and doesn't mind scoring the horrible scrappy goals off his knee and his backside and chesting it in and all of that. I think that it also Brentford will sell.
They have to.
Now, there are others, I'm sure. Like, can we go and get Osimhen? Can we go and get Gavassi? Yeah, well, possibly, but you can't get everyone you want. It's about someone who fits. What does the manager want? Does he want a mobile 9 or a physical 9 who's got a bit of pace and can cause problems? I mean, there's another player at Brentford who I really would like is Mbeumo. I like him. Not necessarily to start, but I think he could really hurt a team. I like, their left back, if he gets back, Rico Henry, outstanding player, really, really good player. And if he'd not got injured at the start of the season, he would probably be in the Euro squad because he's certainly better than anything else left back that England have got at the moment. So there are players, but you've got to sell the club as well. Then it comes down to what you can spend. As I said, money wise, they can effectively spend as much as they want. Is there a will to do it? Now, that doesn't mean go and spend £500 million because we've seen what happens with that at Chelsea. You end up with that's an absolute mess. So it's got to be targeted. And sometimes if 340s might be the answer rather than 100. It's about what you need and what's available. I suspect that on the 29th of June, Daniel will go to Chelsea and say, here's 25 million for Conor Gallagher, and try and force their hand. Because whilst Gallagher may have his parameters, shall we say, he runs and runs and runs. And it would mean if you had him and Sarr, they would both be able to get lots of football, and they would basically be interchangeable, I think, in many ways. I know that Sarr's different physical shape, but what he does is not too dissimilar. And it's about having replacements when your first team, your first 11 players are missing that don't weaken you. I thought the most interesting and significant 15 minutes of the season that proved to be a signpost for where it was going to finish was way back in September, October, when we played Fulham at home on the Monday night. And we won 2-0. You watched the last 10 minutes of that match. And that was what we were without 3 or 4 players. A mess who were hanging on.
Yeah.
And that, in the end, was the sort of undoing of much of the season. When we then 2 weeks later lost 3 or 4 players, the drop off was 30%, 40%, and it should never be that.
Martin, when I asked you about players leaving, you just reeled off a whole list, and about players and positions, where we need to strengthen. You reeled off a whole list. Is it realistic to get a lot of this done in the window? And also what I wanted to ask is, what have you made of Spurs getting deals done extremely early? Because, of course, all of us, we've all been very critical of the club in recent years about Spurs leaving signings right until deadline day. But the 2 windows under Postecoglou so far, I think, have been pretty decent. Last summer, I thought that, the transfer window was good. Spurs were one of the only Premier League teams to get deals done in the January window. So what have you made of that change also?
Well, I think it was overdue, and I think it was positive. I still think the problem you've got, if you're going to get rid of a lot, you've got to make sure you can actually get rid of them. You don't, because you're only allowed to send a certain number on loan. Yeah. You've got to be careful. So I think what you've got to do is to actually make those decisions really early and make it clear to those players that they've got no future and that they want to go. And if that means taking a £5 million hit on them, well, so be it. Just do it, because it's actually for the benefit of the entire squad. If you're a manager, you want to know. You want before the start, 2 weeks before the start of the season, you want to know your starting season squad. Ideally, you'd know your first half of the season squad, and there's always going to be something that comes up in the last few days of the window, like Johnson, for example, who they were obviously monitoring, obviously fancied, but knew it would be a bit of a wait, and they thought it was worth the wait, and I think that's probably right. Actually, I know some don't fancy him, but I thought if you look at his contributions for first season, he did pretty well. His finishing's got to improve, but that's another matter. I think if you get 2 or 3 in early, it then sets it up. It's obviously complicated by the fact that you've got Euros taking up the first 6 weeks of the summer, or first 5 weeks of summer. It starts on June 14, finishes on July 14. It's hard to get things done in the middle of that tournament if you're buying players who are in that tournament or are playing in the Copa America. So you've got to be realistic about it. May be more difficult than you might want it to be just because of that. But you can set things up, and the manager will have to talk with the club and make it clear what his priorities are. And you've got to Daniel and the rest of the board got to make it happen, make it so, get those deals done, and do everything they can to prove to the manager and the rest of the squad that they're serious about doing it. That doesn't mean paying 50 million for a 20 million pound player, but it does mean not offering 25 for a 45 million pound player when they haven't got to sell. You've got to make and I know Daniel is always thinking of the bottom line, and that's his job. It's not because he's tight or no, it's because it's his job to try to maximize the deal one way or the other. He's supposed to do that, but there is a balance sometimes, and the balance is getting the players who you need, but not not overpaying, because obviously that isn't sensible. And look at prime example, Chelsea, overpaying by 30 million plus for 10 players. Unbelievably bad overpaying. We don't want to go down that path at all. But occasionally you might want to put a few bob in just to get it done. But I would like to see it happen now. Yeah.
I was going to say, Martin, it seems that the days of club signings are over. You know, Antonio Conte mentioned club signings a couple of times. Ange Postecoglou seems to be very hands-on when it comes to transfers and what he wants.
I think so. He seems to be having a voice that's heard. I don't believe that anyone would make a signing without the manager saying okay. You know, Conte, wherever he's been, has the same moan. Even when he was in charge, completely in charge, and no one could argue of transfers, he still has the same moan. It's always somebody else's fault. So he signs a player because he wants him. Player doesn't work out. Rather than saying, actually, I got one wrong, he blames somebody else. Well, that's crap. Absolute garbage. But there you go. A lot of them do that. I don't think Postecoglou does that. He takes responsibility for the signings, which I think is good. He doesn't dig players out. When he at no point this season did he dig his players out. There were properly. There were times when he should have done, I thought, or could have done. It's not what he does. I'm sure on the Monday morning at Hotspur Way, it was a very different scenario. But he will not do it publicly. He will do a collective complaint, which is fair enough. When the teams play poorly, he doesn't try and hide it. He'll do a collective complaint, but he won't ever do an individual attack. It's not in his nature. He doesn't want to do that because he wants to foster a commonality, a group think that we can do this together, that we win and lose together. And we're all responsible for things that go wrong. And you, the players, are responsible when it goes right. Not me. I'm responsible when we lose. We all have a responsibility when we lose. When you win, it's on you. And that's what you need, I think. There are lots of managers who the players lose and they win. He's not one of those.
Martin, when you mentioned the owners earlier, do you see there being something different happening now? Do you think that they have changed in any way with bringing Ange Postecoglou in? Because when you think about going through win now managers, you know, if you include Maurizio Pochettino, we've had 7 managers in the dugout since 2019. Do you think that something will be different this time?
Well, he's going to at least last a year, which is good. I think he'll last a few more, actually. I think it's a bit more. There seems to be a process now, which I'm not. I understand why they made the changes, apart from Nuno, which was the most bonkers decision ever, was never going to work. And if you can explain, my only explanation still is that they wanted Conte. No, actually, I thought at the time they wanted Poch to be sacked by PSG and they could get him back. I thought that was what it was all about. And then it didn't happen and they went back to Conte because I couldn't understand how anyone in their right mind would think Nuno was the answer.
We don't talk about him anymore.
Well, it's the least suited manager I've ever seen in a Tottenham dugout.
Yeah.
And there've been some others I wasn't sure about. Santini, definitely wasn't sure about. But Nuno, good God. No, sorry. It's a... but the other ones they made, I get why they went for Mourinho. It didn't work. I get why they went for Conte. It didn't work. The problem with Conte wasn't the appointment. It's the fact that he's a lunatic. He destinated the club. He didn't have to. He could have, as I've said this before, all he had to say was, sorry, Daniel, all of my best mates are dying. I'm not enjoying it anymore. Can we just do a deal? But he couldn't do that. He wanted to force an issue so he could get a payout. In doing so, he blew up the club. And that was unconscionable, unacceptable, just utterly wrong. But anyhow, he's gone as well. So that's fine. I think this bloke buys into it. Look, for him also, it's the biggest club he's had in his career. I know Celtic fans might not want to hear that, but let's be honest, it is. It doesn't mean it will be the biggest club in his career. but it is for now. And if he wants to get at any point something bigger, and there's not many that are bigger than Tottenham, but let's be honest, there's one or two. The way to do that is to succeed at Tottenham. So he's got a vested interest in winning stuff. And I think that's it. They like it. The players like his approach. The fans like the way he's trying to play. They want to see an improvement. But I think there's genuinely a sense of things in the right direction. As for the owners, the owner who isn't the owner, but really is the owner, shall we say, has just paid umpty billions to the US tax authorities for fraud. At some point, he's going to want some of that money back. The way he gets that money back is selling a large chunk of the club. We know that they're already willing to discuss. They, a year ago, they had discussions with the Qataris. I still think there's a chance that the Qataris, because they're in constant rucks with the city of Paris over Parc des Princes and the Stade de France and all of that, I wouldn't be shocked if they thought, oh, I had enough of this, cashed in their chips at PSG and bought a Premier League club. United are off the market. Chelsea are off the market. There's not many that are available. Certainly there's none available with a ready, purpose-built, brilliant 62,000 capacity stadium and the best training ground in the country. All they have to invest in then is the club in the football side of things. It's not a bad proposition for them. Alternatively, there will be other investment groups. Now, we know the latest talk is MSP. I was told a year ago that they weren't interested in Spurs, but they were interested in Everton by someone who should know. But then the Everton thing disappeared for various reasons, basically because they realised it was an absolute basket case. And Everton going into administration over the next couple of months is far from unlikely, I think it's fair to say. So they were right about it being a basket case. I'm told that of the partners, one of them, the agent, Jeff Murad, is actually a Spurs fan. And Najami, who's obviously, they've got a massive share in McLaren F1. They own US sports franchises. You can see why it would be of an interest to them to take a decent stake in the first place, and then with a potential view to a takeover. And if the offer is on the table is the right sort of sum, why wouldn't the owner, who's not the owner but actually is the owner, shall we say, because of this trust thing with Joe Lewis, think about doing that deal? And that would be a very different environment straight away. I think for some fans, the only answer is a change of ownership. I'm not saying they're right, but I understand why they think that. I can see there's a feeling that Daniel and co will only ever go so far, that they're risk averse, that they don't like spending money, all of these tropes, some of which are just not true, some of which probably are true. But they have, if and when they hand over, which they will do at some point, look at what they're handing over. It absolutely is an incredible product that they're handing over. It's ready built for someone to take it on at some point. And when that happens, there may be a little bit of a rethink about what they've done.
Martin, when do you think that the board and the club will be at the stage where we will heavily invest constantly in transfer windows to take us to be title contenders? Because Ange Postecoglou has said throughout the season he wants to be challenging for the Premier League title in 12 months' time. And Christian Romero, his recent comments, next season is going to be a big one for us. All of the players seem to be bigging up for next season. Do you think that the club will be in that position where we can compete for the title along the likes of Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, etc.?
There's a really good chance that the season after next will look very different. That Manchester City won't be in the Premier League. Because if they are found guilty of these charges, allegations, they will be relegated. Now, let's caveat this. The biggest word in that is actually if, because they may be clear. But if they are found guilty, given the scale of the allegation, they will be relegated. I'm not sure which division they'll be relegated to, but they will be relegated. Chelsea could be deducted, I think will be deducted, double-figure points next season. It's still the case, though, that the biggest factor leading to success in football is the size of your wage bill. Teams that pay the most money tend to have the best teams, tend to be the most successful in every league. Not every season, but most seasons. There is a pretty clear parallel between where you are on the wage table and where you are in the championship. Yeah. And if you do better than that, you've overachieved season by season. So if Spurs want to be realistic contenders to win the league, they're going to have to find a way of adding £150 million to their wage bill. The problem for that, and it's going to sound unfortunate, but it's a financial reality. One of the ways to get towards that is to do the thing that they've done this season, which is alienate the fans further by jacking up prices. It would help if they had a massive naming rights partner. It would help if they were in the Champions League every year because of the revenues, etc. And it would definitely help if they had some more sponsorship deals, which are on the scale of some of those of other clubs, whether that be front of shirt, training ground, sleeve, all of these things. They need to probably add 30% on all of those. That doesn't get you at 150 million in extra money to spend. And even jacking up prices, well, it won't. You know, it was a very interesting line from Bayern Munich, Hoeneß, the other month, which was we could pull up prices and earn another €3 million a year. And what good would it do us? But then again, it's a very different model in Germany to here. And they've got Adidas and Audi and all of these people spending huge sums of money sponsoring them. And Spurs haven't got that. So you can be competitive. Spurs should always be competitive. Their aim should always be to try and get into the top four. But to win it, to win the league is really tough. That shouldn't preclude you from having a cup. There's no excuse for not having a proper go at the domestic cups and indeed the continental cups. You know, in the Europa League next year, there are some good teams in it. Roma and Frankfurt and Porto and United. Why can't Spurs win that?
Well, let me go exactly there, Martin, because as you mentioned earlier, Ange Postecoglou made 10 changes against Fulham in August. We were out of the League Cup. We only played 41 competitive games this season, which is, must be an all-time low, really, for Spurs in recent seasons. What are the priorities for the club? What are the priorities for Ange Postecoglou next season? Because, you know, when you think back in the day, when Mauricio Pochettino was Spurs manager and we played in the Europa League, he always seemed to worry about that Sunday game. Whenever he put that Thursday team out, he always seemed to be worried about the Sunday game. How much of a priority will the Europa League be? And how much of a priority will the domestic cups be to Postecoglou, do you think, this next season? Because let's face it, we haven't won a trophy in 16 years.
There's a really interesting situation with Europe because we're playing, because of the expansion, we play 8 games.
Yeah.
Which means 8 guaranteed Sundays in addition to all the other. Actually, not quite, because there's one week where they play Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the Europa League, but let's call it 7 guaranteed Sundays, plus all the ones that get picked on because all the big Spurs games where they can, they'll play them on a Sunday. But because you don't have to finish top of your group or second in your group to go through, if Spurs win 5 out of 8 games, they go straight to the last 16, probably. If they win 3 out of the 8 games, they're in the 9th to 24 knockout round. The money for place positions in the Europa League compared to that in the Champions League is not that high, relatively. You don't earn a lot You earn, for a win, it's a third of, if you win a Champions League game, you earn 2.1 million euros. Winning a game in the Europa League is worth less than a third of that.
Yeah.
Position, and there's also place money for your position in the final table. But knowing that Spurs will, unless they completely blow up, which is not going to happen, be playing 10 minimum Europa League games next season. But knowing that you can afford to lose 2 or 3 to have a look at players, you can be a bit, okay, we'll play the game on Thursday. It'd be good to have a look at the players. First team on Sunday, because we want to win the league. And then you can get to February, and then you start to look at, right, what are my priorities now? And it may be that you get to February and think, you know what, we can probably come third or fourth, maybe better in the Premier League. But we've got to win 7 games in this competition. We've actually got to win 4 games and draw 3. And we win the Europa League and win the Champions League anyhow. And we've got a trophy. And we can beat Roma. And we can definitely beat this lot. You can look at, because also, as of February, you know exactly who you'll be playing in the specific following rounds because of the way they're changing the draw. So it's a Wimbledon-style seeding system. So it's pre-drawn after the 24 are known. So again, you can look at who you might have to play and when you might have to play them. So all of those things mean the dynamic of the season is extremely different and altered from anything we've had before. And we don't know how that's going to work for any club in any of the competitions because we've never been there before. But I do think it allows, because it isn't Champions League, because the quality of opposition is lower, because 4 of the teams we're playing are going to be seeded 3 and 4, and in all probability won't be great sides, you can start to find a way where they can plot their way and keep the focus on the Premier League ahead of the Europa League.
Martin, if Spurs don't win a trophy under Postecoglou next season, but they finish in the top 4, is that a success?
It depends. If you get to the semis of the competitions and get beat by City 3-2 in a brilliant semi-final, and get beat on penalties by Liverpool in the other semi-final, for example, and come third, yes. If you get knocked out of the first League Cup game you play, which will be against a lower Premier League team or even a Championship / League One team, because it's, again, they're seeding the League Cup draw now, so we can't play a Champions League team, and get beat because we don't play in the third round of the FA Cup. Financial success, positive, improvement, but not a success per se. For the manager, it won't be a success per se. Probably for the club, it would be, because Champions League is 50 million without kicking a ball. You know, the most Spurs can win from the Europe, if they win every game, is £1 million more than Villa will make without kicking a ball. That's the difference. So it is a significant financial success. It's not a financial imperative because of the other reasons behind the income streams at the club, in the way that, for example, it really is for Chelsea. Chelsea going 2 years without Champions League is 150 million black hole, because they spent that money in their heads. They got 50-60 million per season, plus the games which earn them 4 million every home game, and there's going to be at least 4 of those, so that's 16, that's 32, that's 150 million. That suddenly hasn't existed for them. That's a real problem for Chelsea. It would be great for Spurs to have the money, but it isn't existential in the same way as it could be for Chelsea.
Martin, lastly, I'm going to shout some names at you, and I just want you to get your thoughts on either them this season or their future. Sergio Reguilon.
Bye.
Oliver Skipp. Do you think he will? Do you think he will stay because he's had very limited game time?
The reason you keep him is that he's homegrown, and he's always a game lad, and he's not a bad player, but he is last 20 minutes when you're 5 up against whoever. He's a see out a game player. If Hoberg goes, he might be the see out the game player you need to have in the squad. If I were him, and I'm sure he loves the club and he wants to be a success at Tottenham, and there's no question, I'd be looking to go somewhere I could play football.
Yeah.
But if he really believes he's good enough, he's not going to do that. But I think, and obviously the reason he wants to stay is because he's Spurs through and through, and that's really laudable. But I think he's got to go and play football, and he's not going to play enough at Spurs. He's certainly not going to play at left back.
No,
he did against Burnley. Oh, blimey!
No, definitely not. What have you made of Radu Dragushin in a Spurs shirt since the January transfer window? And his agent loves to speak out.
We haven't seen enough of him, but when I've seen him, I've been really impressed. I like him. I think he gives you physicality. He gives you a bit of. He's definitely an aerial threat. I thought we were better defensively when he was at the back than before, because he gave you that. One thing I would say, the thing we missed more than anything last year was the man at the front post. And that man at the front post was the centre forward. We forgot how vital, how important defensively Harry Kane was. Because you think about everything else he did.
Yeah.
But one of his great roles was winning that near post header defensively. How many times did he get it clear? And we don't realise that, because everything we focus on the good things he did for the club, and the goals he scored and the assists and everything else and the leadership. But actually, that was perhaps the thing we missed most of anything, because we scored enough goals. We scored more goals this year than we did last year. Not with one player, because everyone had to chip in. But we lost that front post defensive header, which is really important, and that needs to be addressed. But I thought that when Dragushin played, I was actually really impressed with him. I know he made a couple of mistakes because he hadn't played much. He was poor against Fulham, but he hasn't had enough football. I think actually he will get more involved through pre-season this year as well, because of course Van der Ven will have a rest after the Euros.
Yeah.
So at the start of pre-season, Dragushin will be playing centre half alongside probably Phillips, because Romero will need a bit of a rest after the Copa America as well. So the more football he gets, the more you can start to think about incorporating him into the starting side. And certainly, I think they're going to need to rotate all the centre halves. You need 4 centre halves, all of whom are interchangeable, and you can play any of the 4. And if one of them's slightly off it, you give him a rest. You play the others. You've got to be able to do that and have that faith in those players that they can play.
Martin, what have you made of Heung-min Son's first season as Tottenham captain and his leadership?
Look, he's probably the most popular player at the club, rightly so. Outstanding servant, nearly 10 years now. Incredible goal record. I think the Asian Cup took a bit out of him. He wasn't quite as effective when he came back. And there's a reason for that. He played 600 minutes in 3.5 weeks, traveling 6 hours to get there, all the travel he has to do with Korea. I mean, Klinsmann, that was really poor the way he treated him.
Yeah.
When they're winning 6-0 and he keeps him on the pitch for the entire match. What the hell is that all about? Absolute nonsense. And he came back jaded. Again, he wanted to make up for the fact that he'd been away. Actually, would have been better to have had a bit more of a break. And I think he might get a bit of a break over this summer, which would be good for him. No problem with him being captain. This might be his last year.
Really?
Maximum 2 years. I think because he's getting old. He won't want to be there playing because of what he's achieved in the past. He'll want to be there because he deserves his place. And if he starts to lose a bit of pace, he may think after a decade, it's time. I'm not saying he will go at the end of this season, but were he to go at the end of next season, would anyone be utterly shocked? particularly if he was able to go something which, his legacy will never be under threat. He's been an outstanding player for the club. He's fifth leading scorer in the history of Spurs. That's a pretty impressive track record to leave behind. But he's obviously far more effective playing wide than through the middle. He doesn't like playing with his back to goal because it's not what he's there for. He bit of space, run at people, hurt people. He can still do that. Running from deep, coming in and doing that way. All of those things we've seen over his career, what he's good at. If you can maybe play him at centre forward for 2 or 3 matches, but you can't play him there for a run of 6 or 7 because it's not what he's good at and it's not fair on him. He will keep trying. He'll always give everything, but you could see when he was jaded this season, you could see him trying things out of desperation and hope rather than because he really had faith. Because his shooting, which has always been so good from distance, was woeful the last 3 months, wasn't it? It really was. You could back him in previous seasons, even the start of this season, from distance, he would threaten the keeper. I mean, he barely threatened the ball boys towards the end of the season.
Martin, what about Vicario and his first season at the club? Do you want to see him be more aggressive?
I think he needs to learn to play referees better. I think his shot stopping, brilliant. Off the line, excellent. With his feet, really good. He needs to have a ring around him from those. He's got the other. If the referee's going to let the centre forward do that to him, or the attacking player do that to him, then the 2 in front of him have got to stop it. And if they're not going to do that, he's got to learn to play the referee a little bit more. So run into the bloke who's blocking him off and get the free kick for that because he's being blocked off. Play the referee. Also, he's still a young boy. It's his first season of Premier League football. Yeah. I think he was really, really great. He was an excellent acquisition. Really pleased with him. He's only going to get better. He'll be Italy's, the way Donnarumma's been keeping recently, he could be Italy's keeper this Euro, certainly for the World Cup. He's a massive goalkeeper who's going to have a long, long career and a really good one. And we were very lucky that we had a decade of Lloris at his best. We could get a decade of this fellow at his best. Well, that's brilliant. Let's enjoy that. Lloris made mistakes earlier, and all keepers make mistakes at the start. They don't get to their prime till they're 29, 30. He's got another decade. He can be a fantastic goalkeeper for this club. I've got no worries at all. I think he just needs to get a bit wise, become a bit more professional, as it were. Learn the tricks of the trade. Because you've got to. Everyone tries it on. Look what Ben White does to players, to goalkeepers. Everyone's going to try and do that this season.
Martin,
we've got to start doing that to David Raya. Everyone's got to do what Arsenal do to them. Yeah, we've got to do it to Arsenal and get Arsenal wound up. It's part of it. I'm not being critical of what White does, by the way, because if you can get away with it, keep doing it.
Oh, you did get away with it. Yeah. What about Pedro Porro? He's not going to the Euros. Is that harsh on him?
It's harsh on him, but good for Spurs. Because it means he'll be rested.
Yeah.
I think he's carried the can for that defeat against Scotland at Hampden last year when he made a bit of a rick for the first goal, didn't he? And he seems to have had a bit of a downer on him ever since. I think coming with the ball, he's terrific. I mean, he's got that ability. He can overlap. He can shoot, as we've seen. He wants to play for the club, it feels to me. He's enjoying it. It took him a while last season when he came in January, but I think he's, when everything's flying, he's an integral part of it flying because of the way he plays. It is a risk because I said he gets very narrow. It's a risk that they're willing to take for what they can do on the ball. And you can't, it's like when you play cricket, you can't cover every hole in the outfield. You've only got 9 outfielders. You've got to leave a hole somewhere. Football's the same. You've got to leave a vulnerability somewhere if you're going to do certain things. Well, we're backing then Romero to get across the screen to stop the ball getting out to that space in behind Porro, and the keeper to be off his line and make a save if he has to, because that's what it boils down to. Look at that Champions League final last night. Any other goalkeeper but Courtois, and Dortmund are 2 up at half time.
Yeah.
Goalkeepers have to make big saves if you're going to win matches, even for the biggest clubs. The best teams have had big save goalkeepers.
Martin, you mentioned the under-21s earlier. What does Ange Postecoglou do with a lot of these under-21 players who are literally knocking on the door? Because it's fair to say they've had a fantastic season, winning Premier League 2. They won the playoff final. They got into the Premier League Cup as well. I've watched a lot of the under-21s this season, and a number of players are on fire. How does Postecoglou keep all of those young players happy? Is it a case of he will have to let some of them go out on loan, or does he keep them in the under-21s if he's not using them in the first team squad?
I think you need to get them out on loan to play football. You don't win anything for winning the under-21 league. And if you look at, there's maybe 6 or 7 players who people are saying, wow, he could be. If you're lucky, you get 2 a year. Very lucky you get 2 a year.
It's a huge step up, isn't it? I hear a lot of fans saying they see clips and they go, get him in the first team squad. But when I've seen some of these when I've seen some of these under-21s go in the first team squad, it is a huge step up, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to get any, if no manager is going to play a kid who he doesn't know is up to it in a Premier League game, unless the game is dead. Whether if you're 4 down or 4 up, well, that doesn't happen very often in the Premier League. Hopefully, you're never 4 down. Although obviously we're at Newcastle, frankly, but it doesn't happen that often. So you have to find a way of managing. You need to make sure they're ready. So I think loans for Phillips played in a poor team at Plymouth, but he played some football. It's not necessarily about the quality of the success they have when they're away. It's learning about how to play. So Phillips and Devine, Devine was at Port Vale, then at Plymouth. Phillips went to Plymouth. The other boys went to Ipswich. Scarlett didn't play enough. I said, some of them aren't going to be good enough. You just got to decide it's not going to happen. Sorry, move them on. Thanks very much. See ya. If you really fancy, more 16, keep him for another year. Maybe, or you say, actually, no, we're going to send you out in January. You stay for the first half season. I'm going to sacrifice the rest of the youth season, but I want to send you to play in League 2 in January for 4 months. The next stage. Donnelly, right? Are you going to play for me next season? Probably not. Do I want you to be do I want you to play the season after if you're good enough? Yeah. Okay. Right. You go and play in the Championship for a season. Learn about playing against seasoned professionals whose livelihoods are on the line, and others as well. Simsat Bell, the Spanish winger. All of these Lancashire, get them playing football. Find out. Not all of them, maybe at once, but over the season, if they're not going to play first team. And if you recruit the sort of players that you want them to recruit, they're not going to play first team yet. You keep the one you really fancy and put him in the squad, but tell him you're not going to play. You're going to play 5 minutes here and 10 minutes there. And you give the others a chance to play first team football. And maybe some of them you send on loan. If you can get one to a Premiership club where he might play 10 games. But if you send Lancashire to Southampton, he plays 10 games, that's really useful. If he's good enough to play 10 games. Not start 10 games, maybe but play 10 games. That might be beneficial long-term for the club. You've got to think short-term, medium-term and long-term.
Martin, last couple of questions for you. If I was to put you on the spot and ask you for a prediction of how many players will come in the door and how many players will go out the door in the summer, what would you say?
I want to say 7 out, 5 in.
Busy. Yeah.
I want that. I think it's viable. I do. Ideally, you get 7 out and 7 in. But I'm not sure that's going to really actually happen. But it could do, because I think there's a recognition that you don't win anything with a 15-man squad.
Yeah.
Well,
of course, it needs to be bigger for the Europa League as well.
Yeah. So I think it's essential that you get rid of players who are never going to make an impact for the club.
Yeah.
And you have to be brutal and be prepared to take a bit of a hit sometimes, because it's the only way you're going to have a squad that's capable of genuine progression. And that's an essential prerequisite of success.
Martin, of course, the Euros is only a couple of weeks away now. England face Bosnia and Iceland in a couple of friendlies before the tournament. What do you think of England's chances? Because we talk a lot about Spurs not winning trophies. Of course, England haven't won one in such a long time. Is it finally England's year?
They'll go close because they've got so many attacking options. I mean, Kane, Saka, Bellingham, Foden, whoever he plays on the left. I think a bit of me says he should play Bellingham slightly deeper and play Gordon on the left because he's running behind. I was really impressed with him this year for Newcastle, and he's happy on the left as well. Obviously, you look at them and think, crikey, he's going to play left back. And if it ends up being Trippier, who seems to be struggling at the end of the season, that may be a bit of a weakness. But you've got to have a weakness somewhere. No team has got 11 superstars. They should win the group. They should get to the semi-final. They should play France in the semi-final. Then you'll know. But if they didn't get to the semi-final, I'd be disappointed. And if they were to beat France in the semi-final, they would then play Germany or Spain probably in the final, and they could win that. I think when they placed France in the World Cup, they didn't think they could win. They came out of that believing they should have won and that they can win next time. But the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. In that moment of pressure, can they hold it together? Can they find in themselves what it takes to get over the line? And we know that England teams in the past have failed to do that for a variety of reasons. And you don't know until it happens, until we see it, until they've done it. You know, we couldn't beat Germany forever, and then we beat Germany. We couldn't win a penalty shootout, then we won a penalty shootout. You've got to keep going over these steps. But they're a very good team. There isn't a better attacking unit in the tournament. But it all has to be a cohesive 11. And
are you going to Germany?
I'm going out. I'm going to be I'm going to Frankfurt tomorrow week for 5 weeks or 4 weeks in Frankfurt. Then I go to Berlin for the last week or so of the tournament, plus the 2 semis in Dortmund and Munich. So yes, I'm going to be there. I'm not going to see much England until the semi because I've got other games to do, which is quite fun. I did England for 25 years. Someone else can have a go at that. I'm more than happy not to. But I'm looking forward to the tournament. I think it'll be really, really interesting. I think it'll be a great tournament. I think the atmosphere will be fantastic. I think the Germans will be brilliant hosts. And I think it's going to be a load of fun. But I love tournaments anyway. I always have. I'm really lucky that I've been going to tournaments for 30 years. Infinitely better than working for a living, I promise you.
Well, that's exactly that. That is the very last question of this show, Martin. What is it like being the chief sports reporter at The Sun? Because I doubt there's ever 2 days the same.
No, it's brilliant. I'm very lucky because I've got this sort of wide palette. So I do a lot of football politics. And last week I did a load of stuff on Club World Cup and FIFA relationship with Premier League players, etc., which was quite fun. But I also do lots of other stuff. So when I get back, as soon as I get back from the Euros, I'm packing my bags to go to Paris for the Olympics for 3 weeks. So I do all of these things. I do tennis normally and a bit of cricket, and I did all the Rugby World Cup. So I've got this huge wealth of sport that I get to cover, which is brilliant fun. And I'm still doing it a bit too close to 60 now. But I love it still. I love every moment of the job. That's not quite true. I love most moments of the job. And I wake up every morning thinking, what am I going to do today? And that's really good. And it's not oh God, what am I going to do today? It's what am I going to do today? What's today going to bring? And I love that. And I always have. And I've been incredibly privileged to have been asked to do a job that I would have paid to do. I've been to events that I couldn't have conceived of going to. I've done things that would have been childhood fantasy. If you said to me at 18, you're going to go to one World Cup final, I'd have said, oh, fantastic. I've done 7.
Wow.
I've played Augusta National. because I won the ballot when I covered the Masters. I was at the Cricket World Cup final in the front row of the Allen stand. All these sort of things that have come to me because of the career I've chosen. And I've been incredibly lucky because, God blimey, there's a lot more talented people than me who fell by the wayside. I've just been able, my face is fit, I work hard, but I love it. And and the moment it ends, I'll be really sad, but I won't be bitter because of the incredible fortune I've had over these years. And the moment it ends, it's great because while I'll be sad that I'm not working anymore, it means I can spend more time at Spurs. So happy days. I'll even be able to afford a season ticket with a bit of luck. I'll beg, borrow and plead my way to get one because I don't see that much live football because I'm doing other things. But it is fun. It really is. And don't anyone kid you otherwise. It's hard work, but crikey, it's better than working.
Martin, it sounds like we could record a podcast just on your career, which sounds fantastic and it sounds a lot of fun. But you're always such a fantastic guest and you always get so many positive comments coming in stating that people have really enjoyed listening to you. So hopefully we can get you back on the channel very soon. Where can people find you, lastly, and what you're up to at the moment?
Oh, crikey. They can find me sometimes in a very large pool of sweat. I'm working hard. I'm on X, formerly known as Twitter, as they call it, at Martin Lipton. And I'm in the sun most days on various platforms, in the paper, online, videos, YouTube, you name it. I come up with it. I haven't changed. I'm still the same bloke I was when I started in this job. I'm still the same bloke I was at 18. I just got grayer and older and fatter. And the bags have got deeper and deeper. And I'm really lucky, my boy's 14. He knows more about football and more about Spurs than me. He's an absolute, he loves every moment of it. We spend most of our conversations are so Tottenham. That's how it starts. Whatever happens, he reads all the feeds. He tells me every transfer rumour and it's brilliant. And then we argue about who should play and who shouldn't play. And when we go to games together, it's that brilliant experience. I was very lucky. When I was 6, my dad took me for my first game, 1972. I always wanted to be able to take my kids. My daughter's gone to a few games. My son's been to a few more. And for me, that's why we go. Yeah. You go for the people around you. You go for the fun. You go for the bond. You go for that common experience. You go for the joy. You go for the pain. Most times when you start with the ball, you don't score. Most seasons you don't win. Most games you want to win, but the reality is more football's more about the disappointment than the joy. It makes the joy more exciting, more glorious. That's what you do it for. And you go with your friends and your mates and your father and your son and all. That's why you go, because it's deeply embedded in you. And, a bit of me disappeared the day they knocked down White Hart Lane because I'd been there for 50 years. But another part of me was birthed like a phoenix, 2 years later when the new stadium opened. And this stadium will be my son's White Hart Lane.
Yeah.
Hopefully his children's White Hart Lane, and hopefully they'll be, they'll enjoy the success that I enjoyed in the earlier part of my life when we were winning FA Cups, 3 times in 10 years, and winning other trophies and winning the Europa League or UEFA Cup as it was, twice in my lifetime in the space of 12 years. All these things I can remember. And hopefully that will come. And I believe it will because everything is in place.
It sounds like you're going to steal my line, Martin. My line was the trophies are coming. That was under Jose Mourinho. So hopefully they are coming soon.
Well, hope so. But if not, I'll still go. Of course
we do. Yeah.
That's it. You journey in hope, not expectation.
Yeah.
It's the journey that's the most important thing. It's great if you reach the destination, but we all want the journey. We're all part of that journey. Every single one who goes through those turnstiles, those who don't go through the turnstiles, but watch from wherever they are in the world, if it's their club, those who would love to go to the turnstiles, but can't afford it, but have always been Spurs supporters. We're all on the journey.
Yeah.
And it's the journey. That's what matters.
I actually took that trip to Australia, Martin, a week or so ago. That was a journey and a half.
Go and see another penalty shootout defeat. Well done.
I'll tell you what, though, full respect to the people in Australia, because they get up at like 1, 2, 3 a.m. They watch the games, then they go to work. And like you say, we all watch Spurs in different ways. But full respect to every fan.
Absolutely. Look, it isn't, you're only a real fan if you go. No, everyone's a real fan. Everyone's a fan in their own way. But if you're a match-going fan, it's a different experience, because you get the intimacy, you get the journey with your mates, you get the pub you go to, or the restaurant you go to, or the McDonald's you go to on the high road, which that was it for me. Every game, afternoon game, me and my mate, Mike, would stop in that McDonald's on the way home. And now, every afternoon game I go with Ollie, we stop in the McDonald's on the way home. That is part of the day. Win or lose, it's part of it. And I don't. The only time I ever go to McDonald's is coming back from Tottenham. I never go any other time other than buying stuff in motorway services. But that is it. I'm a bit of a creature of habit. I love those things. I always go to Seven Sisters and walk down the high road.
Yeah.
Rather than getting the bus, or rather than going to White Hart Lane. You've got your ways of going to games. And it's just all part of what makes you a fan. The match day experience, all of that. It's just it's football. It's why we do it. And if it became all encompassing, all or nothing, if my life was determined by Spurs, it wouldn't be fun, because I'd be miserable. But I'm really lucky. I love my life. I love football. And the moment the game's over, I spend loads of time talking about football and thinking about football. But don't let it get me down. God, there's enough things in this world that get me down. There's enough things in this world that get all of us down. You've got to have fun. It's football. It's what we do it for. Bring the smile.
Well, thank you, Martin. You've certainly made the viewers smile today with your takes on Spurs this season and looking ahead for next. And as Martin said there, follow him on X. And if you'd like to say hello to him, go to the McDonald's in Tottenham. Martin,
opposite Bruce Graves. You can't miss it.
Martin, you've been a great guest. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll have you back on again very soon. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. And until the next time, come on, you Spurs.